Greetings, Andrew Deese, for my final reflection video for the leadership class. One of the questions is what it was one of my main takeaways. Um, when I was looking at the part one reflection and the part two reflection, um, a lot of what I said had or fit into some theory. I just honestly didn't know there was all these different kinds of leadership theories out there. And so, I really enjoyed part two and being able to go back and look at part one about some things that I said, which made absolutely no sense, and then some things that I didn't say that I was really surprised that I didn't say. Um, in specific, when I was looking at, I was so task focused, and when I was defining a leader, it was who was at the top of the food chain, and that's not the case at all. That's who your manager or supervisor is, but that doesn't make you a leader, and you absolutely could be, but just because you're the one that signs the checks doesn't make you a leader, and so I'm just baffled that that's what I said. Like, I don't know. I honestly don't know what I was thinking. Because, a leader could be at the bottom of the food chain. A leader could be a housekeeper, could be a custodian, could be an entry level coordinator. And that those are not the ones that have all the power, not the ones that have all the authority, but they're still leaders. There are a good number of the approaches that resonated with me. In initial reflection, I thought I was a situational leader, which I still believe that I am. Um, Certainly, when I'm looking at things that are important for me when it comes to leaders, it's they got to know their stuff. So that's the skills approach, hands down. Like, you could be the nicest person in the world, and if you don't know what you're talking about, then I'm not going to have really anything for you, and I'm going to have trouble following you. So certainly the skills piece, when it comes to the technical and the conceptual, and then the human side is obviously a required and necessary component of that. And I reflect upon the old director of marketing here when Armstrong was, or when this campus was Armstrong. She was so good and so talented, and she was relatable. She was funny. She was a real treat to be around, which I was really sad when she left. The other approach, or one of the other approaches that resonates for me, is the behavioral approach. And this, in my reflection, is I'm really good at the task behaviors, but could stand to improve on the relationship behavior side of things. Um, and that was reflected in my initial or part one, where I focused so much on how I'm a closer, I get things done, I'm a problem solver, and didn't talk anything about relationships. And when I reflect upon that in part two, and now it's I am definitely a closer, definitely a problem solver, but could stand to improve those relational skills. Sometimes I get a little too task focused, and don't spend as much time on the relations and developing those relationships. Um, some other ones, I think for me, being authentic. So the authentic approach is something that we could stand to have more of. And this isn't just, well, let me give you an example. I work with someone who he touts that he's just keeping it real and he's the same person regardless of who's around. And I think that that's great on paper. But you can't always be the exact same dependent upon the environment and who's in the room. And if you are, you're never going to advance. So you have to have that political intelligence, and that social intelligence as well to be able to figure those pieces out. I like to think that I'm authentic. When I reflected, I could let people see more of who Andrew truly is, and that will help with those relationships. I think my personality gets me a long way because it's a little extra sometimes. But I think if you don't know me, oftentimes my passion, not oftentimes, sometimes my passion can be mistaken as um, aggression, for lack of a better word, which is absolutely not. One of the other approaches that really resonated with me is the servant leadership, or that servant approach. And I know there's a lot of historical with Greenleaf and all of that. But for me, it's, the Bible says be subject to one another. And I think that that's really important, and that we should be subject to one another, and we should serve one another regardless of the level. And I think that's, it's in simple things like opening the door, or, if you're cleaning up your plate, you take somebody else's. And I think that that sends a really strong message, and that we're not in, or I'm not in the ivory tower, and that we're all equals when it comes to who we are as human beings. How this is all going to impact me as a future as an educational leader, I think, is really being able to have now this theoretical basis for looking at folks and looking at leaders and looking at myself. I love the book, as I said in my part two. One of my favorite books in the doctoral program so far is, so I'm going to keep it on my shelf. And, when I'm working with difficult situations, when there might be some challenging leaders, is taking a look at where they might be in some of these approaches to see if it can help change my approach, or how I'm working with them or for them. My takeaways from this as a tier 2 doctoral student: time management, some of the assignments to take some time, but I also think I mean, this is a leadership degree, so I think I guess I didn't think I was going to enjoy the class as much as I did, and I think it's going to help me frame my dissertation a little bit and the approach that I'm going to take. But then also on the back end, or I guess post back end, after the dissertation is done, is really implementing the programs that I hope to implement, with the results that I'll hopefully get from my dissertation. What aspects of the coursework were most helpful? Certainly part 1 and part 2 reflection I thought were great. The theory chart, honestly, I found really irritating at first, but now I'm looking at it now. I was looking at it from when I was doing my reflection, so I think a good easy reference for when I'm looking at these in the future, and really integrating this knowledge into the doctoral program, but also into work. I also think it's going to be helpful when looking at peers that are in my cohort. There's some folks that have a lot of personality, myself included, and will really help me to learn to work with them and adapt to them, and be able to be successful with them. Overall, I really enjoyed the class. I am certainly going to take the theoretical approach, and it's really helped me take the feeling, and just go with me on this, take the feelings out of my areas for improvement, and put them into kind of more black and white. And I think that that's something I've really enjoyed about it, because I know the things that I've needed to work on, and I think now it's kind of putting those issues into a theoretical box, to really help me think about them kind of outside of myself, is going to be helpful. Particularly, one of the questions was, how am I going to advance? And it's really taking some time to think about my interactions with folks and how I can let more of me out, and lower that wall, or maybe build some windows in the wall, not necessarily lower it. I pride myself on being relatable, but I think there is opportunity there. Not for students. I think students connect with me well. I think it's more for other administrators, to really see the passion that I have, but also to see me. And I think that that's what's going to help get me jobs, if that's here, if that's elsewhere, because it's that relatable piece, and seeing folks want you to be a good employee, but they also want you to be a good team member. So overall, love the class. Really enjoy the interactions with folks, and really, like I say, really enjoyed the reflection of part 1, and more so part 2, of being able to kind of reflect upon my first reflection, and apply the theory to it. That's all I got. Hope you're having a great break right now, and that you have a great winter break.